Joining us now is Roberto Jaguaribe, APEX-Brasil president and former Brazilian ambassador to China and in the UK. And of course, Geoff Dennis of UBS is still with us in New York. Ambassador, let me start off with you. What do people misunderstand about Brazil? We've never really seen an election like this. 13 candidates, and it will be most probably whittled down to 2 candidates, far right, far left.
Well, this election is probably the most polarized of the last many years. But, you know, I am responsible for trade and investment, and we don't see and don't foresee many changes in this respect. Over the past few years, Brazil has increased its availability to foster new trade agreements with different parts of the world, with Europe, with Canada, with Korea, and others. And I think we're going to pursue this fact. Prior to that, we were very much concentrated on trying to achieve a global understanding within WTO. But of course, now this is clearly out of reach for anybody.
What does it mean for investment in the country?
Well, you know, investments in Brazil have always been significant. Brazil has been always one of the preferred FDI destinations of the world, even during this past few years, which have been critical years politically and economically in Brazil. Foreign investment continue to pour in. This year is an election year. We continue to have investment. Over the last few months, of course, a lot more of expectation, but we certainly don't expect that will be any reduction in foreign direct investment in Brazil. What we're witnessing now is a more, let's say, a waiting game, particularly from Brazilian investors themselves.
Even if the market favorite candidate or candidates actually gets through, how can Brazil bounce back?
Well, I think that Brazil has already overcome the brunt of the biggest recession we have ever faced from 2014, 2015, 2016, and still a little bit in 2017. Last year, we already witnessed effective growth. This year, even more. And we're envisaging even growth in sectors that have been the hardest hit, such as the industrial sector, which is going to grow about 2% this year, next year as well. So I think overall, we have overcome many of the main problems that we faced. But there are many challenges ahead. There's a fiscal challenge, which many countries face, including Brazil, and also a, let's say, a competitiveness issue in some industrial sectors, which has to be tackled.
Ambassador, back to the Brazilian spring of 2013, and of course, everyone worldwide was thunderstruck by the size of the protests within Brazil. Within this election, as Francine mentions, a fractured election, how attached or detached are the traditional Brazilian elites from the people of Brazil?
Well, I think Brazil, although far, is not outside the planet. So Brazil also suffers from the lack of representation that people perceive in many other democracies throughout the world. And this is clearly a case that has been happening in Brazil for some time now.
Geoff Dennis, what do you make of Brazil? Again, what are the key things that investors want to know?
I think for us, the disappointment with Brazil this year in terms of the way the equity markets behave, which of course is what I do, is yes, the ambassador's correct. You've had some sort of recovery in the economy, but it's been much weaker than we had anticipated at the beginning of the year. Our forecast at the beginning of the year was around 3% growth. It's going to be probably 1.5%, maybe a bit lower than that. So the economic recovery has been disappointingly slow. Investors care about that. And the other point is that I think we all felt that by now there'd be some visibility about a centrist, market reformist, if you like, liberal in the old-fashioned sense of the word, but politician coming to the fore to win the election. Now, as you've rightly said, you've got this extreme situation. So there's a lot of uncertainty as to how, you know, the policies play out afterwards. You're probably going to have a left-wing candidate against a very right-wing candidate, as you say, and that's what creates the uncertainty. But where I 150% agree with the ambassador is the Brazilian real is cheap, and being cheap, Brazilian assets have cheapened up. And that's often been an indicator in the past. If people say, these assets and those great assets in Brazil, he's so right, so much FDI goes into Brazil. If at some point when people get a sense of clarity and the world's not going to end in Brazil, which of course it won't, they're going to look at those assets and say, they're too cheap, I need to invest.
Geoff Dennis, thank you so much with UBS. Ambassador, thank you so much for your perspective before this important election. Roberto Jaguaribe is with APEX Brazil.